Good day, Mr Jones. Phil Curry from the Sydney Morning Herald. Welcome to Canberra. Look, on coal seam gas, I'd suggest you'd have no greater ally today in this town than Bob Brown. In fact, he said this morning that, you know, glad to see you were backing their stance on coal seam gas and food security, that you come from the Darling Downs, you're into this issue, you know about it, and you're right. I was wondering whether you would also agree with Bob Brown that the push for coal seam gas is part of meeting the rapacious demand for energy, and that the Greens would argue that rather than keep pursuing fossil fuels, you know, we need to do more towards renewable energy. Would you advance the argument down that direction at all, or what is your solution if we don't go for the gas?
Yes, thank you, Philip. It's a very good question. You see, the most probably appropriate answer to the question is I don't think enough is known about coal seam gas. There is no suggestion that if we are worried about carbon dioxide emissions, now you're well aware of my views on that, but if we were worried about that, there is no evidence yet that coal seam gas would be more effective than coal itself if you were worried about those emissions. And that's my point. There is simply no homework done on this. What has happened via the moratorium on royalties here, governments are broke and they've just taken the money, and Anna Bligh concedes, talking about billions of dollars in royalties. We'll worry about all the other stuff later. Now, the potential for this to devastate agricultural land and to affect public health. Now, Frank Sartor, in his book, which is called Fog on the Hill, makes a very valid point. And he says last year he was persuaded by information that had come to him to go to Singleton to speak to a doctor who's done significant research there into the consequences of mining on the health of children in that particular precinct. He said when he went there, he was so persuaded by what he was being told that he went back to his cabinet and said, we've got to do something differently here. This can't go on. He says in the book that Eric Roosendahl said he would do nothing, the government could do nothing. Frank Sartor in the book said, I then learnt that my government was a prisoner of the mining companies and I decided there was not much of a role I could play. So whether coal seam gas is, if you're looking for an alternative, I'm not, but if you were, there is not sufficient evidence to suggest that it's a viable green alternative. I think where Bob Brown and I see eye to eye is the devastation that this is causing to prime agricultural land, which is what Kevin Rudd's talking about food security and so on. But I think you'll find, Philip, that most all of these political parties are in bed with these people. I mean, as I said before, I think the upper house in Queensland is virtually the mining industry. Now, you've got Campbell Newman having a lunch with Amber Energy. I wonder, did Campbell Newman say to the people from Amber Energy, you surely under my administration, if I become Premier, will not be able to proceed with this coal mine and this petrochemical plant at Felton. But then Seeney is the leader of the coalition in the Queensland Parliament, and he's got people from the gas company on his staff. I brought this particularly today because this is a document that I'm not meant to have, in a way. You get it from Freedom of Information, you've got to fight like hell for it. And this is a list of lobbyists on behalf of the mining companies. Now, who do they get? Well, you just, for a start, AGL, alphabetically it's in front. So this one is a former Labor Deputy Premier, former advisor of the Queensland Premier Peter Beattie, policy advisor of the Queensland Minister for Natural Resources, former Queensland Liberal Attorney General, former political advisor of the Queensland and ACT governments, former Assistant General Secretary of the Australian Labor Party. There are pages of it. Former senior advisor to Bob Hawke, former New South Wales Liberal Senator, former Treasurer of the Commonwealth, former Chief Advisor to the Treasurer of New South Wales. These people are paid, there's pages of them, paid by mining companies to gain access because they know the system is worked and away you go, with no consequence for the damage that's being done.